Hello chess friends and welcome to your of Chess channel and welcome back to our Slav Defense series. So in this series we're covering this very nice opening from a white and from black perspective, and today we're continuing with the Slav Defense and the so-called Süchting Variation. The Süchting Variation is a tricky and positional approach of blacks in which black is trying to provoke some weaknesses on white side on the board, but there are I think also some great opportunities for white in order to counterplay black ideas. In my opinion, the Süchting Variation is not so dangerous when you're playing the game with the white pieces, if you know of course what you're doing, and in this video I think we'll cover the most important strategical and tactical elements of this opening line. So let's check out now first the Süchting Variation. Here d4, we have d5 of course by black, c4, c6, so we have the Slav Defense on the board. We have knight to c3, knight to f6, knight to f3, and now comes the Süchting Variation move. It's the move queen to b6, and I've meant many times this idea. Most of the times I have to admit I really didn't know what to do here, because there is a clear idea of black is trying now to play this very annoying attack against this pawn on d4. We'll try also to play bishop to g4 and we'll attack simply the knight. If you don't react correctly, I think black could have a comfortable game, because here I wanted to show you how black can get out very easily in this opening line. Here it's a great gameplay by Shakir Mamedjarov against Gata Kamsky. Here after move queen to c2, which is in my opinion one of the best ways how white should proceed. Here comes the tricky part of the Süchting Variations. Of course the main ideas, as I said, bishop takes f3, then queen takes d4, but here I think Shakir Mamedjarov played now really not the sharpest line. He played now a positional move e3, which is a little bit of a passive move, we have to say it. Here if you try, let's see also possible opportunities here for black. If you play of course d takes c4, it's not so dangerous. We can play e4, bishop to g4, maybe again with the same idea. We can play bishop to c4, and after bishop to f3, g takes f3. Even if black takes, now the main tactical goal here from white perspective is the move queen to b3, and now you see the pawn is hanging. Even if we try e6, then we can simply takes, and we take out the rook, and also the knight is hanging. So d takes c4, it's not such a good idea here for black. So as we said, the main goal of the Süchting Variation is this move, bishop to g4, immediately with ideas of bishop takes f3 and then queen to d4. So here in the continuation, as we said, Shakir Mamedjarov played a little bit of a passive move, and it led now into a simplified line for black, because here after move e6 we have now knight to e5. Finally Shakir Mamedjarov gets out of this positional threat here, because there is always this threat bishop takes f3, then g takes f3. Your pawn structure is a little bit messed up here on the king side. So after move knight to e5 we have bishop to f5, and actually after bishop to d3, here Gata Kamsky has a comfortable game, bishop to d3, queen to d3, and now queen to a6, and black has solved now all of the positional problems. Here in the continuation, queen to e2 played by Mamedjarov, we have bishop to d6, and after f4 here it's I think a decent game for black, because here after knight from b to d7 we have c5, and here Gata Kamsky played here actually a mistake, but the game ended in a draw, and that's not the point of the video. I really didn't want to show you now the whole game. But after the move here queen to e2 and maybe knight to e2 or king to e2, we can simply take bishop takes e5, f takes e5, and here knight to e4, knight takes e4, d takes e4 is of course an opportunity. But the main issue here for white in my opinion is simply this bad bishop, which is of course blocked out by its own pawn. So as I said, even in the after this positional trades of pieces, after move bishop to d3, here we can notice immediately that white is continuing the game with a bad bishop, which is simply blocked out by its own pawn. So in my opinion, here as we said, the move e3 is a little bit passive. There are better ways here, and I wanted to show you really a great game here played by Daniel Naroditsky against Alcaraz Ortega. And here I think Daniel will show us the most important idea of the Süchting Variation from white's perspective. Here Daniel Naroditsky played here perfect game, and I think you should really use this moment, these elements that Daniel will introduce to us here, because there are really sharper ways how to beat the Süchting Variation, and I think Daniel applied all of them. So here we have now the move d4, again the Süchting Variation with the move queen to b6, again queen to c2, and now comes this idea bishop to g4. Here Daniel played a very tricky line, c takes d5. In my opinion, that's simply the best way how to play against the Süchting variation, because there are now two ways, of course, to proceed here. If you play c takes d5 or knight to d5, if you play knight to d5, then you get again this idea e4. You can play knight to b4 maybe, but then queen to b3 again with ideas of bishop to c4. Even if you take, as we said, g takes f3, even if you try here queen to d6, queen takes d4, then you have bishop to e3. The queen has to stay in order to defend the knight. Then you have queen to d6, but now after rook to d1, basically the game is over here for black. So these are the tricky parts of this opening after move knight to d5. So I think after this move knight to d5, every time we'll simply have to play the move e4. We'll have an expansion on the in the center of the board, and you shouldn't be so worried because of this idea queen to d4. We see that with the move bishop to e3, the bishop gets very active into the game, then rook to d1, and I think white could have a really active game. So here in the continuation of the game, Ortega tried here the move c takes d5, and now comes the actual idea of the Süchting variation from the white perspective. Now comes the tricky part. Now comes the move e4, which was of course played by Daniel Naroditsky. Here after move e4, we have d takes e4. If you try knight to e4, the problem is now with the move e4, we gain sort of a tempo, and now the bishop comes very active into the game with the move bishop to b5. You can of course maybe cover with knight to d7, but now knight to d5 is the main issue. And even if you try here maybe it's Zwischenzug, an intermediate check, if you try here the move queen to a5, then we have b4. We're stopping a little bit this potential progress of the queen. Then with if the queen retreats to d8, then we have knight to c7. The fork actually, knight to c7 would be very dangerous because you have to give up the queen if you don't want to be checkmated. So really tricky stuff already, really wild stuff in this opening, because as we said, after move e4 there are only two good ways here for black. So as I said here, the best way is after e4 we have d takes e4, but again knight to e5 comes very active in the game, and you see now the bishop is hanging on g4, which was in the beginning the best minor piece of black. So here knight to c6 played by Ortega. We have bishop to e3. Really great attack here by Daniel Naroditsky. If you play something like knight takes the d4, again it's not so good, because after bishop to d4 we have queen to d4, then bishop to b5. You have to cover with one of these pieces. Then if you try bishop to d7, knight takes d7, knight takes d7, and now again this tactic rook to d1, of course you lose the piece here on d7 and eventually the game. So really tricky already in an early stage of the game. So what you could try after a move here bishop to e3, you could maybe try queen to c7, but it's again not so much better, because knight takes g5, knight takes g5, we have now d5. You see, with the bishop pair on the board, with this mobile pawn on the d file, white has a really comfortable game. You can maybe try knight takes e3, f takes e3, knight to e5, but bishop to b5, again very dangerous. And if you try to escape with your king, we can simply castle. You see now many targets here from white perspective, the pawn on f7, the pawn on e4. We can double up here, maybe also getting some activities on the c file, discover attacks against the queen, activating the knight. So here it's already a +2 position for white. The lack of development is actually the main issue here for black. Black cannot play e6 in order to develop the bishop. It's also very tricky. D takes e6, then maybe the d file gets open. So really too many positional problems here for black. So here after move bishop to e3, in the continuation Ortega tried queen to a5. We have now bishop to b5. Look how Daniel Naroditsky's pieces are dancing. They're playing all over the board. Every piece is active. So in the continuation we have rook to c8, knight takes g4, knight takes g4. Now actually a similar position happened here, and now comes the tricky part again, d5. We have knight takes e3, f takes e3, and here Ortega tried to counterplay with the move a6, but actually here Naroditsky again played the correct move. We have d takes c6, we have a takes b5, but now after c takes b7 the rook is hanging, and the rook has to retreat now to b8. But now here Naroditsky simply castled and has now again a +4 position, which is really wild if you think about it hard. The material is equal, but again the lack of development is simply too much to handle here for black. Black has to secure the king somewhere, has also to develop the dark square bishop. It's simply too slow. Meanwhile, of course, white is doing something. The pawn here is hanging. So you still need to lose another tempo in order just to grab one pawn. So as I said, the lack of development is the main issue here. So here in the continuation, pardon me, let's go back, sorry about that. Okay, let's go back to this position. Sorry. So after move here, casting here in the continuation, Ortega played the move queen to c7 in order to play even maybe a tricky move b4. But here Daniel Naroditsky played the move queen to b3, although probably the better way is simply to proceed here with rook to c1 immediately, staying first of all with this rook on this file. If b4 happens, still we have this idea, queen to b3, of course a counterattack here against this pawn on f7. So as I said again, black is in my opinion tactical loss. We can then try knight to d5 even, so many tactical possibilities again for white. So here after move queen to c4 was played by Daniel Naroditsky's queen to b3. Here Ortega tried to simplify the game by trading off the queen, which is of course a natural idea. Here in the continuation we have rook to d1, e6, knight takes b5. Here Daniel maybe didn't play really the most accurate game, moves when it comes to computer relations, but that's actually not the point here. It's again a +1 position for white, so it's still a winning position. Daniel played really here almost perfect game, really brilliant ideas in the Süchting variation here from white's perspective. After move queen to b3, a takes b3, rook to b7, but now this rook comes very active in the game. Again, you see black is simply tactically lost. We have king to e7, knight to d6, the knight comes very active into the game. We have rook takes b3, we have here a check, king to f6, now rook to f1, again a new check, rook to g6, now knight to f7, the rook is saying you have to move. We have knight to e5, you see all of the pieces are simply dancing. We have king to h5, again a very nice pin here by Daniel Naroditsky. The bishop cannot move. Actually bishop to d6 happened, but now rook to g8, we have bishop to e5, and now it's obviously a much better continuation. Daniel is simply up the whole exchange. We have bishop to b6, rook to c6, and now after rook to e6 the game was practically over. We have king to f5 here, rook to e8, bishop to f6, now simply improving the position of the pawns, and here in this position Ortega resigned. So as I said, this is not the actual point of this video, how Daniel Naroditsky won this game. Actually the main tactical and strategical and positional goal of this opening is, in my opinion, this move e4. We're waiting a little bit, e4, then after d takes e4, knight to e5. You see now the pieces are dancing. Bishop to b5 is a serious threat, knight to b5 is a serious threat, bishop to e3, d5 are the main threats. So the activity that you gain with this gambit move e4 is, in my opinion, something that you should apply if you meet the Süchting variation here from white's perspective. In my opinion, this is simply the way how you should play this opening, how you should make progress in the continuation of the game. So really brilliant game here by Daniel Naroditsky. You should also check out, of course, his YouTube chess channel. He has a really great YouTube chess channel. I really like his speedruns. I watch them sometimes. He's really a strong player. He battled also against Magnus Carlsen in a decent way, so it's I think a great YouTube chess channel that you should follow. And here he showed us also a great way how to proceed in this Süchting variation. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this study. I really enjoyed it a lot. It will help me out as I'm a d4 player, and I met several times the Süchting variation myself, so I think I'll apply the Daniel Naroditsky line against the Süchting. If you want to study the Slav defense more, please check out my Slav defense studies from the beginning, so part 1, part 2, part 3, and so on. And if you have trouble maybe to play as black, check out my hyper accelerated ranked Sicilian defense series and my Nimzo Indian defense series from black's perspective, as good responses to e4 and d4. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.